The night his house burned to the ground, David Carter thought he had lost everything: his memories, his dignity, his future. But what he didn't know was that the real fire was yet to come. When the woman responsible, a smiling face of the neighborhood HOA, walked into his courtroom the following week, David was forced to confront not only her hatred, but the centuries-old weight of racism that threatened to bury him. What unfolded inside those walls was not just a trial over a house, it was a battle for justice, identity, and the right to exist without fear. David Carter had always dreamed of owning a home. For years, he worked double shifts at the auto plant, saving every penny while raising his daughter, Maya, and caring for his aging mother, Lorraine. When he finally signed the papers and stepped into the small two-story brick house in Crestwood Meadows, it wasn't just a purchase. It was validation, proof that all his sacrifices had meant something. The neighborhood, however, was not as welcoming as he had hoped. Crestwood Meadows had manicured lawns, shining mailboxes, and an HOA board led by a woman who seemed to embody its rigid spirit. Karen Whitfield, blonde bob, pearl earrings, always dressed like she had just stepped out of a country club brochure. From the first day David moved in, Karen's smile never reached her eyes. "We have rules here," she said, handing him a pamphlet with highlighted passages. "We expect everyone to maintain standards." David nodded politely. He'd faced worse before. He'd faced teachers who doubted his intelligence, bosses who made jokes about his skin, neighbors who crossed the street rather than greet him. He thought he could handle Karen, but Karen didn't stop. Notices began appearing in his mailbox. "Your grass is 1 inch too high. Trash bins must be brought in by 8 p.m. No basketball hoops visible from the street." At first, David complied, but the letters grew nastier, layered with thinly veiled contempt. He once overheard Karen at a block party whispering to another neighbor, "This isn't the kind of family we want lowering property values." On the night of the fire, David was on the porch sipping sweet tea. His daughter Maya was inside, playing the piano softly. Lorraine had gone to bed early. It was peaceful, until the smell of smoke hit his nose. At first he thought maybe someone was grilling late. Then the crackle grew louder. He turned to see flames licking at the side of his garage. "Maya! Mom!" David shouted, rushing inside. Panic surged through his veins. He grabbed his mother, coughing from the smoke, and pushed Maya toward the front door. Neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, some screaming, some just staring. The fire grew monstrous in minutes, consuming the siding, then the roof. David tried desperately to drag a hose across the lawn, but the flames spit back at him like a beast too hungry to be stopped. In the crowd, he caught sight of Karen. She stood with folded arms, her lips curved in something that looked disturbingly like satisfaction. By dawn, the house was nothing but smoldering rubble. Everything David had worked for was gone. The fire marshal's report came swiftly. "Accidental electrical fault." David read the words over and over. His gut twisted. He knew it wasn't an accident. He'd seen Karen smirk. He remembered the way she had once said, "Some fires cleanse what doesn't belong," but suspicion wasn't evidence. Days bled into nights as David tried to salvage scraps of his life. Maya cried for her lost piano. Lorraine sat silently, staring at the ashes, whispering prayers. David filed complaints, begged for deeper investigation, but officials brushed him off. "Accidents happen," they said. Karen even visited him 2 days later. She stood by the yellow caution tape, crocodile tears in her eyes. "So tragic," she said. "I told you these old houses aren't safe. Maybe it's a sign you should find a neighborhood more suited for you." That was the moment David knew. He wouldn't let this go. He found a lawyer, Daniel Green, a young attorney hungry to prove himself. Together, they filed a civil suit against the HOA, naming Karen directly. It wasn't just about money. It was about truth, about standing up against a system that had always told David to sit down and be quiet. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and coffee. David sat at the plaintiff's table, heart pounding as Karen walked in. She wore a pristine white suit, her hair styled flawlessly. She smiled at the judge, at the jury, even at David, as if She were greeting old friends. Her lawyer, a seasoned man with silver hair, whispered in her ear. Karen's posture radiated confidence. She didn't look like someone about to face consequences. She looked like someone who believed she was untouchable. When the judge called the court to order, Daniel rose. "Your Honor, this is not just a case of arson. This is a case of hate, of a man targeted because of the color of his skin." Karen's lawyer scoffed. "Your Honor, this is baseless. My client is a respected community leader. She had no motive, no opportunity, and no connection to this unfortunate accident." David clenched his fists. He wanted to shout, to demand the world see the truth, but all he could do was wait. Witnesses were called. Some neighbors spoke in David's favor, recalling Karen's hostility, her words about undesirable families. Others shrugged, unwilling to get involved. One neighbor even defended Karen. "She just wants the neighborhood nice. That's not a crime." For a moment, David feared the case would collapse. Then Daniel produced the footage. It came from an old security camera across the street, owned by a man too nervous to speak until subpoenaed. The grainy video showed a figure, Karen's figure, carrying a red gasoline can toward David's driveway late at night. The jury leaned forward. The judge's brow furrowed. Karen's smile faltered. Her lawyer stammered. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Daniel's voice rang clear. "This was no accident. This was deliberate. This was hate." David felt tears burn his eyes. For the first time since the fire, the weight of disbelief began to lift. People could finally see what he had always known. The verdict came after hours of deliberation. Guilty. Karen Whitfield was convicted of arson and a hate crime. When the sentence was read, Karen's composure cracked. She shouted at the judge, at the jury, at David himself, "This is my neighborhood. He never belonged here." The outburst only sealed her downfall. As officers led her away, David sat in silence. He wasn't smiling. The fire had taken too much for joy. But in that silence, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Dignity. Vindication. Later, standing before the ashes of his old home, David whispered, "They burned my house, but not my hope." He placed Maya's new keyboard on the porch of the rental home they had moved into and listened as she played. The music was shaky, imperfect, but it was alive, just like him. And in that moment, David knew the truth. They could take wood and brick, but they could never take his fire.